10 days ago from the time of this recording, Blue Origin sent up their reusable New Shepard rocket on yet another suborbital flight, but this one was a little bit different. At the time, I didn't even bother to report on the incident, because after all, Blue Origin's been doing this for quite some time, and for a company that's been in existence for 2 decades, I'm really thinking that suborbital flights are a bit beneath them, or at least it should be for a company that's supposed to be a major player in the private space industry. But aboard this New Shepard was a scientific package from NASA that Jim Bridenstine called critically important to the future of Artemis, and Blue Origin had a hell of a lot of other things to say about it. Quote, "Today's flight was inspiring," Blue Origin CEO Bob Smith said. "Using New Shepard to simulate landing on the moon is an exciting precursor to what the Artemis program will give to America. Thanks to NASA for partnering with us, and congrats to the Blue Origin team on taking another step toward returning to the moon to stay," unquote. Now, Blue Origin could not have telegraphed their intentions more. Obviously, they intend to use this test as justification that they are the company to provide the lunar lander for the Artemis program, and we're going to get a little bit more into detail as to exactly how. But whereas the military seems to have Blue Origin's number, and they've started to deny Blue Origin funding, NASA does not seem to have the same mindset. And while Blue Origin has spent a lot of time bemoaning the fact that they've lost all of these valuable military contracts and they've been working to try to get them back, it's this particular contract, the Lunar Lander contract, that has me the most concerned. Because if Blue Origin happens to win this thing, if they happen to win this bid and provide the lander to return man to the moon for the first time in half a century, we might not only have a situation which leads to the death knell of the Artemis project, but actually could end with the death of an astronaut as well. How could all of these grim scenarios take place? Well, I'm going to explain all of that to you in just a few minutes. Welcome to yet another episode of the Angry Astronaut. So once again, I'm going to have some fun with my favorite chew toy known as Blue Origin. And some of you may be wondering at this point, at least those of you who've been watching my channel for a long time, what does this guy have against Blue Origin? Is it because he got kicked off their property by a security guard or something like that? Well, no, my disdain for this company existed far before my visit to Cape Canaveral and their facilities down there. And it really boils down to a number of basic principles. And, the biggest problem that I have with them is the fact that in the space of 20 years, despite the fact that they are backed by the richest guy on the planet who has over $100 billion, or at least is worth that much, have been unable to put anything into orbit, not even once. Whereas look what SpaceX has accomplished in even less time. Or what I think to be an even more potent example, look at what Rocket Lab has been able to achieve and the number of payloads they've been able to put into orbit in a much shorter amount of time and with a hell of a lot less funds. What excuse does Blue Origin possibly have for all of this? And at the same time, They're receiving funds, government money for a variety of things from NASA. They got money from the military, but fortunately, that military money has been cut off. And frankly, it needs to never come back, or at least not come back until they've actually done what other companies who get military funds have to do. And that is to demonstrate that they are capable of putting payloads into orbit on a consistent basis reliably. ULA can do that. SpaceX obviously can do that. Blue Origin has yet to do it once. Why do they expect military funds? It's absurd, but it goes even deeper than that. It also extends to this wasteful and idiotically designed lander of theirs, which I'm going to talk more about. And not only how its wastefulness and it represents a threat to the whole Artemis project, but also represents a threat to astronauts' lives. And we're going to go into detail about all of the failings that Blue Origin has and why I have such a problem with them right now. Now, unless you have only a passing interest in spaceflight, or you believe that the moon landing was faked and the Earth is flat, you probably have seen this video over and over and over again, because this is just about the only visual evidence, aside from a few photographs of fairings and engines and such, that we've seen from the flagship of the Blue Origin organization, the New Glenn. Now, admittedly, when this thing finally gets off the ground, it's going to be a very competitive, mostly reusable heavy launch vehicle, capable of carrying 45 metric tons to low Earth orbit and 13.6 tons to geosynchronous transfer orbit to the moon. Not bad at all. When it flies, that is. And believe it or not, design work on this rocket began way back in 2012. Now, the first test flight for this thing is supposed to take place in 2021. However, most analysts are finding that to be incredibly unlikely, with how many things Blue Origin still has to do to make this thing flyable. It's far more likely that this rocket will fly in 2022, meaning a 10-year design time frame from initial design to launch. Very, very bad for a private company. Now, by way of comparison, the ULA Vulcan began its design work in 2014, and it uses the same engines as the New Glenn, the BE-4, which admittedly are pretty good engines, at least as much as we can tell. However, it also uses solid rocket boosters and other things that add to its complexity, such as an upper stage that's much more sophisticated than what the New Glenn has, and yet still, it's going to be flying in 2021, so a 7-year design time frame for a company that is known for not being tremendously fast on the draw when it comes to designing new rockets. However, this fact did not stop the U.S. Air Force from investing $500 million in the New Glenn back in 2018. However, fortunately, this money was dependent on Blue Origin becoming one of the commercial providers for military launches for the next 5 years in the 2020 bid. Blue Origin lost that bid and lost the money, although they are trying very, very hard to get it back. However, this decision is hardly surprising given the fact that even if the Vulcan is delayed, both ULA and SpaceX have the ability to launch military payloads into pretty much whatever orbit they want right now. So for the next 5 years, from 2020 until 2025, they have a launch capability. Blue Origin does not. I mean, it's a pretty simple decision. Now, of course, it could be argued that the military awards contracts to vehicles that don't exist on a regular basis, such as the Sierra Nevada Shooting Star, which happens to be one of my favorite space companies. But there's an important difference, and by the way, they intend to use this thing for a small orbiting space station capable of carrying 10 tons worth of top-secret equipment. The difference is Sierra Nevada can provide tangible proof that this equipment exists. There's the shooting star, and here's the Dream Chaser. There's very little question that both of these vehicles will be available by 2021 as promised, unlike the New Glenn. But NASA, as we've seen, seems to have a lot more faith in Blue Origin, awarding more than half of a $1 billion competitive award to the national team led by Blue Origin and including Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, along with Draper, more money than their competitors, SpaceX and Dynetics combined. And this is what concerns me about the new Shepard test, because the scientific package from NASA included a descent and landing computer, navigation Doppler LiDAR, and terrain relative navigation, all specifically designed for a lunar lander approaching the lunar surface. NASA could have picked a lot of different companies to do this, but they picked Blue Origin. So am I concerned about this development because a company that I don't like might win this lander bid? Well, hardly. This thing is poorly designed and, frankly, both wasteful and potentially dangerous. The descent element on the left is designed by Blue Origin and is not reusable, by the way. The ascent element, which is just coming into view right now, is the only reusable part of the lander. Lockheed Martin, a company not known for making reusable spacecraft, has designed the ascent element, by the way, and Northrop Grumman designs the transfer element, which is based on the Cygnus resupply ship, and it also is expendable, being necessary to take the lander down into lower lunar orbit. Now, some people in the comments section in the past have argued with me that the transfer element could be reusable, but I recently asked this question of an expert on the subject, not somebody from Blue Origin, obviously, no way they're giving me an interview, but somebody heavily involved in the competition, and that's Kathy Lorini from Dynetics. Have a listen. The Blue Origin solution the transfer element and the lander do not seem to be reusable from what we've seen, and yet it appears that almost your entire lander is reusable. Would you say that that's a fair statement to make?
I would. I think that comes from our architecture and the decision to refuel in lunar orbit.
So of the three competitors, Blue Origin is the only one that does not seem to have embraced reusability. You need a new transfer element and a new lander every time you go down to the lunar surface, which drives up the cost of the Artemis project, which is already dangerously over budget, making it even more likely to be canceled by Congress at some point. But this is not the worst thing about this lander. Now, I've talked about the danger of this thing's ladder in the past, but this photograph illustrates the danger, I think, more than anything. I mean, look at this thing. It's so high that it requires a bucket truck to work on it safely. I mean, can you imagine trying to climb this thing in an EVA suit? But then again, the lunar gravity is only 1/6 of Earth, so wouldn't that make it less dangerous? Let's go back to the interview.
Well, I think certainly the impact of falling off a ladder on the moon is going to be less than falling off a ladder on Earth because of the reduced gravity. But it can't be understated, the risk. I mean, there are the lunar regolith is very abrasive. The lunar, the possibility of a crew entanglement into a ladder. There's a lot of hazards that need to be addressed. I mean, that's why ladder companies spend a lot of money on the ergonomics of ladders, because there are a lot of risks associated with falling, and the risks are not only those associated with the impact because of 1G. And so I'll just take it back to the Dynetics solution. I mean, what we really offer is a lot less complex opportunity for or solution for crew operations on the surface. It's a lot lot easier for them at the end of the day to get back in. It's a lot quicker at the end of the day for them to get back in a lander in a contingency scenario. It's a lot easier for them to bring an incapacitated crew member if they need to help a buddy who's incapacitated for a reason get back up. I mean, could you imagine if somebody falls off a big tall lander and breaks something? You know, or springs a leak in the suit. I mean, you've got a critical situation where the buddy has to help them get back up the ladder and into the lander. So again, the operations concept, relative lack of complexity that's offered by our solution can't be understated.
Now, granted, an astronaut could conceivably hook themselves on to every rung of this 10-meter tall ladder every time they go up and down it, but that would reduce the amount of time you have available for an EVA by a tremendous amount, plus make it incredibly difficult to haul a fellow astronaut up a ladder if they were injured, as Kathy pointed out, along with so many other safety concerns. And can you imagine what would happen if someone were injured or killed as a result of this safety problem? The field day the media would have about why did NASA approve this thing in the first place? It might put Artemis into an early grave, not to mention the unfortunate astronaut who ended up stuck in this thing. And this is why I am so concerned about this recent new Shepard launch and the experiments associated with it. NASA is already paying Blue Origin for things associated with a bid that is not yet complete. Does this suggest that NASA already is leaning towards Blue Origin because of the relative simplicity of the lander? Because so much of it is based on technology that already exists? If so, they are making a tremendous mistake. So why do I have a problem with this company? Well, obviously it has nothing to do with a grudge. It's because they're getting funds that they're not yet entitled to and trying to get more. But even worse, they're endangering a program that is absolutely essential to man's return to space, at least in terms of exploring the solar system. Not only endangering the program, but endangering their lives. And that is why Blue Origin sucks. So I hope I've given all of you quite a lot to think about when it comes to all of Blue Origin's failings and why they simply don't deserve any of our taxpayer money. I mean, it can't be any more obvious than this. It doesn't just go as deep as the fact that they haven't gotten anything into orbit and are still expecting government funds, something that other companies just simply haven't gotten. SpaceX had to prove themselves. They had to put a Falcon 1 into orbit at least before anybody started seriously looking at them. Why does Blue Origin get special treatment? Why have they gotten money from NASA and the US military already? Is it simply because of Jeff Bezos and his incredible personal influence and all of the powerful friends that he's made? I somehow think so. And really, I would be less annoyed with all of that because, after all, there's lobbying and corruption and that sort of thing in the space industry all the time. And certainly when it comes to military procurement, that there's that sort of thing. But now it's getting worse. Now we're talking about a new lunar lander that may very well win this bid that is not only going to put Artemis in danger in terms of a financial standpoint, but is also going to put astronauts going to the moon at risk as well. Can you imagine us putting the first woman on the moon only to have her die in an accident? NASA might never go back to the moon again. This is a risk that we dare not take. And if NASA approves this lander, even going into the next round of competition, then they are taking a risk that is just completely incomprehensible. They need to move forward with SpaceX and Dynetics, especially Dynetics when we're talking about the lander part. That is, in my opinion, and I hope I've shown you this in the video, that is our best solution for a lunar lander in going back to the moon. It's safer, it's reusable, it's inexpensive. There's just too many advantages to it. And it is so much better than what Blue Origin is proposing. What SpaceX is proposing is better than what Blue Origin has too for a lunar lander. I would prefer that also. At least the thing's fully reusable and doesn't have a death-defying ladder on it. I mean, I'm not thrilled with the concept of an elevator that theoretically could break down, but still, that's a lot less dangerous than trying to clamber up a 35-foot ladder in an EVA suit. But we've talked enough about that. But how can Blue Origin be expecting all of this government support when they have yet to accomplish anything except suborbital travel? Granted, they have some very good rocket engines that are ironically going on the Vulcan Antares that will be taking off in July of next year if everything goes according to plan, which will most probably be before the New Glenn takes off. Again, inexcusable. The Vulcan's development began just a few years ago, whereas Blue Origin, what exactly have they been working on for the last 20 years? But I could talk all of this to death. The fact of the matter is it seems that the US military has finally gotten a clue on this company and aren't going to fund them any further until they start producing some results. In other words, get the New Glenn up and running using their own money. And it's not like they don't have it to spend, because they most definitely do. So, all of that having been said, once again, wearing my Olympus Mons hoodie, and there's a lot of different options with this merch that I'm offering right now. And during the course of the video, I also showed you the back of it, a map of the Tharsis region of Mars, which has the largest volcanoes in the solar system. I think it's a pretty cool little item, but of course, that's for you folks to decide, but it's one way to support this channel. Or you can be a Patreon supporter. I'm nearly up to 300 of those. Thank you so much. I would not be able to accomplish anything on this channel without your support. So I really, really appreciate that. It makes all the difference to the growth of this channel. Or if you're unable to support me financially, just please hit that subscribe, hit that bell button. That would make a huge difference to me too, and it'll get me another step closer to blowing up this cup. And I'm filming this early in the morning where I definitely need some coffee, but I would really prefer not to be drinking it out of that Boeing cup anymore. I want to blast that thing into pieces and do it right on camera where you folks can enjoy it. So let's get to 40,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for watching, and until NASA realizes what the US military has realized, that Blue Origin is a company that is a lot of talk and very little action, and refuses to fund them any further until they actually produce some tangible results besides the new Shepard. I urge all of you to stay angry about space.